Well, the CNN poll release today is a real poll, at least. What the fuck? Well, a few days ago, I was talking about how the way that you interpolate the undecideds is a key to predicting the outcome. You'll notice something different about this poll. It adds up to 97%. Most of the polls released over the last few months add up to around 90%, and the difference seems to have gone entirely to Trump. To be clear, Clinton's around flat, Johnson's around flat, Stein's around flat, but Trump seems to have made up about 6 or 7 points as the undecideds fell to the margins. I wanted to really clarify that point. What is different about this poll? What is different about this poll is that the number of people that are saying they're undecided has gone down, and the number of people saying that they want to vote for Trump has gone up, and by about roughly the same distance. So it's not that people that were going to vote for Clinton have decided that they're going to vote for Trump instead, or even people that were saying they were going to vote for Johnson have decided to vote for Trump instead. It's the people that were saying that they hadn't decided yet have moved largely towards Trump. Is that going to sustain itself? Well, I don't know, but I do know that this is probably a very important part of understanding what the polling is actually saying. A few days ago, I asked the question, what does undecided actually mean? We had data indicating that both candidates were unpopular, but no way to really piece anything causal together. When you tell a pollster that you haven't decided yet, does that mean that you hate both candidates? And if it does that mean you'll vote for a third party? If it does that mean you'll stay home? And if that's the case, will it distribute? What this poll here specifically seems to suggest is that undecideds may be leaning heavily towards Trump, but we don't know if we picked something up here or if it's a relic of the methodology. Personally, I find that hard to believe given his numbers. If you believe that poll, then he's running 20 points ahead of his approval ratings. Normally, one would run behind their approval ratings because people would approve of you and, vote for somebody else instead. Note that the Labor Day weekend is always perilous to poll over, and it was polled, I think, from September 1st to 4th, so it was the weekend that this poll existed in. Polling over the Labor Day weekend is known for producing strange results. You get outliers. It was the Labor Day weekend poll that had the NDP at, I think, 45%. I'll explain why I think that that's the case. For the moment, I have to point out that we'll have to see what happens, whether this is an outlier or not. I'm skeptical myself. Also note that while the NBC poll is more in line with the trend lines, the methodology is garbage and it should be ignored. So there was also an NBC poll released today. It's an online survey. It doesn't look that different than the other polls, but it's not a real poll. The CNN poll here is a real poll. Okay. The results are unexpected, but it is actually a good poll. I hope I'm being clear that I'm not cherry picking things. I'm being very specific about what methodology I use and accept, which polling I accept as valid. Not because I like the results or don't like the results, but because I like the methods or don't like the methods. Now, I point out that it's a little strange that Trump is running 20 points ahead of his approval ratings. There is an explanation for this, okay? The idea is articulated a lot of ways, but the idea is that you may get some bias in polling on issues of race. You can call it a shy conservative effect, or a Bradley effect, or a reverse Bradley effect, or there's a lot of different ways to articulate this idea, but it essentially reduces the, when you have media coverage that's overwhelmingly in favor of one candidate, for whatever reason, you may have people on the phone not say what they're actually going to do. People on the phone will lie to the pollsters because they find it embarrassing to admit what they're going to say because they know that it's so far out of line with what they're being told is popular opinion, right? Given the media coverage, I would acknowledge the plausibility, okay? The high likelihood that a subset of people may be embarrassed to admit they plan to vote for Trump. And they might be telling you they're undecided, but in fact, they're not undecided. They have every intention to vote for Trump. They just don't want to tell anybody. In this case, it's not a shy conservative effect because he's not a conservative. It's not a reverse anything effect because there's not really any race involved in the race. It's just people not wanting to admit that they're going to vote for somebody that's really unpopular. Maybe there's a process of paranoia involved. They think that the results are being recorded. Is it paranoia? We've learned a lot of things over the last couple of years, right? This is something that exists. Just like, I was pointing out before that, like, some Bernie Sanders supporters were supporting Bernie Sanders solely because they could not vote for a female candidate. And you did see that come out, right? And they are going to vote for Johnson. And it is because they're sexists. It's hard to measure it, but it exists. And likewise, there is going to be, this is hard to measure, and like I said, I don't want to use any terminology that exists, but it's a real thing, and you will measure it if you can, right? But to suggest that, if you have the undecided, whatever the undecided vote is, to suggest that 100% of the people that are telling you that they're undecided are secretly, Trump-loving racists, and they just want to tell you that, it's a bit much. So even if the poll is revealing something, and it likely is, that it has to this point been hidden, I'm still more likely to point to the Labor Day weekend as an exaggerating factor, okay? If Trump voters are lower income and less educated, they're more likely to be home and ready to pick up the phone this weekend. So it may be picking up this effect over the weekend, but it's being exaggerated because it's the weekend. It's picking up something that's real, but it's distorting it because of the sample space, the reduction in the size of the sample space. Not even the size, but the character of it, right? And then, why did the undecideds come down this week all of a sudden? You have to also answer that question. You have undecideds at 10% for weeks, months, and then all of a sudden they come down that far. Well, maybe they didn't. Maybe they just weren't home to pick up the phone, and so you had less undecideds in the sample, just because there's less affluent people picking up the phone on Labor Day weekend. I'm not going to make predictions. Again, I don't think it's possible to predict the outcome of elections using models or regression analysis. I'm just pointing out reasons to be careful with this pool, and reasons it may end up in right field, but also reasons that may actually be somewhat illuminating in the end. I'm helping you understand the pool. It does appear to likely be picking up somewhat of an effect of Trump voters that are claiming they're undecided. But let's not jump to conclusions, because the date of polling is going to produce a distorted result, because the sample is distorted. It's garbage in, garbage out. But do note that, the date of the polling aside, this was a real poll. And I will take this poll as more valuable than, any online polling you want to throw around. Careful